Hey everyone, I had a really interesting conversation with my Pleiadian guide the other day. She was explaining to me the nature of our universe and why we feel or appear to be so isolated and separated from our star family, the star beings, even the Pleiadians, for example, the Arcturians, whoever it is that you resonate with. Why are we so separated from them? We look out into space, we look into the night sky, and we see the beautiful stars, a lot of darkness. We could see some of the planets, but we don't see a whole lot of activity. Where is everybody, right? We have this communication with these amazing higher frequency beings, but yet we don't see them when we look out. Now, if they're here, where are they? That's the big question. Well, she was explaining to me that we are surrounded by this energetic blanket, okay, which really keeps us separated or feeling separated from the rest of the universe, from our star family, from our guides, things of that nature. And this energetic blanket is science calls it the Van Allen belt. Okay. And this Van Allen belt is it's actually multiple layers of charged particles that completely surround the Earth. It's almost kind of like a donut that goes around the Earth. And this Van Allen belt is really like a filter. It acts as a filter. When we look out into space, it distorts what we see. Okay. So think of like a fish in the ocean or in a fish tank, even looking up out of the water. Everything that it's going to see is distorted, right? It's not going to really represent what is really beyond that fish tank or beyond the ocean, right? So that's what's happening. We have this blanket of charged particles, which is essentially keeping us in this 3D frequency and cutting us off from everything. Now, how did that get there? Well, it's the cause and effect type of a scenario. So as the planet descended in frequency, this Van Allen belt kind of materialized, right? You could also flip it and say that this Van Allen belt was placed there to keep the frequency of the planet low. That's the timeline cause and effect scenario. But the reality of it is, as we descended in frequency, this Van Allen belt really manifested as a response of the frequency that humanity resonated at. So it is reflective of the separateness that we feel because of the frequency that the collective is at. So what's going to happen when we rise in frequency? That is going to be the amazing shift. And some of us already are starting to be able to look beyond that Van Allen belt and see a very different universe out there. When we look up and we could see craft flying around and energy and auras and all sorts of things like that. We are rising in frequency and essentially leaving that blanket behind. We're moving beyond that blanket. When astronauts, for example, travel out into space, they move into the Van Allen belt, through the Van Allen belt, out and beyond. If they're going to the moon, even our probes are going beyond the moon, out into deep space. They are moving into different frequency energy. Now, the astronauts see a similar type of a picture as we see, because they are essentially taking their environment with them. Okay, so if you take the fish again, we want to use the fish example, the fish in the ocean or in the fish tank, and we dip, like a fish bowl in there and bring it out with water and with the fish. The fish is out of its environment, but yet it still has a pocket of its normal environment around it. So it still sees everything as the same. That's what's happening as we travel beyond the Van Allen belt towards the moon and things like that. It's still perceived the same way as we see it here. Now, the interesting thing is we do have instruments that can detect these higher frequencies. So my guide was telling me the solar system as we see it is not the solar system as it really is. Okay, there is life teeming throughout our solar system and throughout the universe. It's at a higher frequency. Okay, so our probes go off into space. They go on beyond the Van Allen belt. What do they see? Well, we see images that are in the frequency of what we would come to expect, which is 3D. We see barren planets and things of that nature. But is it possible that NASA and maybe the government have an expanded bandwidth of instrumentation and they're seeing something very different? Think about that. We know there is activity on the moon. There's activity on Mars. My Pleiadian guide also said to me that Mars, what we see is very different from reality, from what is really happening there. So when we could rise in frequency, essentially what's going to happen is Gaia is going to dissolve. This Van Allen belt will dissolve, and we will rise up and we will rejoin the rest of our galactic family right here in our very own solar system. They're in the atmosphere. There are craft everywhere. We can't see them because we are currently vibrating at the frequency of this Van Allen belt, right? So we see this blanket, and it's reflecting back to us the frequency that we're vibrating at. Okay, so what will happen is when we rise in frequency, we will rise beyond this Van Allen belt, and all of a sudden, the craft are going to just start to appear. And some of you probably can do that now. I know I've done that. You could rise in frequency, and the craft will just kind of start to appear in the night sky. So that's going to happen more on a collective level as we go on and the Earth goes through its ascension process. We're going to essentially be riding the Earth up out of this 3D, 4D density up into 5D and rejoin a very, very different reality as close to home as our own solar system. And I want to stress to you that and make this point clear that reality exists right now. We have just been separated from it based on frequency, a difference in frequency, and we cannot perceive it. So when we work on ourselves, we meditate, breath work, those kind of things, we are creating space to be able to bring in more of our higher self and rise in frequency. And as we continue to do that, we will naturally join our star family in 5D. So if you know anyone that this video can help, please feel free to share it. Give it a like and a follow if you're watching on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, comment below. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you, guys.